What do you think is waiting for you out in nature? The trees, the wind, or something still watching from the shadows? In today's video, you'll hear three true stories, all taking place in places that seemed peaceful. At first, a lakeside trail, the forest behind a quiet home, and an unnamed valley deep in the mountains of Oregon. These are the kinds of experiences you never forget, and maybe you're not supposed to, because something is still out there. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and get ready to step into the darkness. Story 1. The Ones in the Woods. When you think you're alone in the dark, someone might be watching you, and it's not just one, but a group. I'll never forget that night. Years have passed, but every time I close my eyes, I can still hear every sound, still see every flicker of light in those woods. I was just a teenager back then. My best friend Justin and I were night longboarders, total night owls who loved that feeling of silently gliding through empty streets. No cars, no people, nothing but the sound of our wheels on pavement. That night we decided to try a no path, a narrow trail just wide enough for foot traffic cutting between two long, narrow lakes. The moon was shining on the water. The breeze rustled the trees. It was beautiful. We skated about 2 miles until we hit the end of the trail. But we were still riding the high of the moment, so we kept going, turning onto a side trail that led into a protected wilderness area. It was close to 2 a.m. We climbed up a small incline. At the top, we both stopped the slope ahead, led into total darkness. But there was something moving down there. A small light, floating, slowly drifting side to side. We leaned in, squinting, trying to figure out what it was. Not a car headlight, not a flashlight either. It was dim faint, like someone feeling their way through the dark. Then suddenly it flared bright. At that exact moment, several other lights exploded to life from all directions, like off-road headlights or motorcycle beams. The whole forest lit up in a flash, and a deafening roar of engines filled the air. We didn't say a word, we just ran. Behind us, someone screamed, "Get them!" We were lucky we found a deep rut in the hillside overgrown with vines and grass. We dove in gasping hearts pounding. Within minutes, 4 men charged through where we had just been 2 on ATVs, 2 on dirt bikes. They were yelling, arguing, and one of them smashed a beer bottle on the ground, shouting, "They're still here, find them." They weren't in any kind of uniform. No park ranger gear, no handheld flashlights, only the harsh glare of vehicle-mounted lights. Not how a ranger searches, not even close. We stayed completely silent. They fanned out into the woods. One of them even went back the exact way we'd come in. It was organized, way too organized, like they'd done this before. We didn't dare turn on our phones. Only when the lights had faded far away did we crawl out of the rut and start running. The forest was pitch black. Every time a light flared in the distance, we dove into the brush, sometimes hiding behind nothing but a few thin branches. There was a moment where I crouched behind a small tree and a dirt bike idled just 50 feet away. It was the most terrified I've ever been. After nearly an hour of dodging and hiding, we finally burst out of the woods, collapsing on the side of a road near a 3-way intersection. I opened my phone, hands trembling, and called our friend Connor. By some miracle, he was still driving toward our original meetup point, just a few miles away. Less than 10 minutes later, his car skidded to a stop. We threw ourselves into the back seat and shouted, "Go, just drive. He didn't ask. He hit the gas. And I just curled up in the back seat, watching the streetlights blur past, still not fully believing we'd made it out. We never reported it, because even if we had, those people would have already vanished. Story 2. The cry in the forest. Not every cry should be followed. Some cries are traps. I used to live in a small coastal town in Newfoundland, where every home sat surrounded by endless stretches of pine forest. When I was 10, it felt like paradise. Now, at 21, living in the busy city of Alberta, I still think about that forest sometimes. But I also remember the reason I never, ever went back. Back then, my mum would sometimes leave me home alone when she visited my grandma and aunt. Our house sat at the end of a quiet trail, completely isolated, just trees and the sound of wind at night. That evening, I got bored of playing video games and decided to go for a walk in the woods, something I used to do all the time. I usually just walked to a big rock and climbed to the top to stargaze. From there, I could still see the lights of our house, so I never felt scared. But this time, just as I stepped onto the rock, I heard something, a sound, a cry. Soft, distant, but clear enough that I knew it wasn't my imagination. A trembling, choked sob echoing from deep inside the forest. I froze. My first thought, someone's lost. A little girl. I hesitated. Should I run back and call my mum? But what if it was real? What if they wandered off by the time I got help? I decided to follow the sound. The crying didn't stop. No words, no call for help, no name. Just a steady, slow weeping, like a recording on repeat. I walked deeper into the woods, stepping on dry branches and soft moss. The trees grew denser, but the sound stayed ahead of me, always just out of reach. Eventually, I stepped into a thin clearing, moonlight cutting through the trees, and in the center of the brush was a large grey cassette recorder. And the crying was coming from that. I froze. It wasn't a person, it was a machine. Someone had placed it there. And then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. But I saw a tall shadow spill across the forest floor in front of me. It didn't speak, just started moving toward me. I ran, didn't think, didn't look back. I tore through branches, thorns scratching my arms and face. I didn't know if I was being chased. I couldn't hear anything, but I wasn't going to stop to find out. I recognized the rocks I used to climb on. The tree I once tied a hammock to. Everything I once saw as a playground became a trail of survival. Finally, I saw the house lights through the trees. I ran inside, slammed the door shut, locked everything, and turned off the lights. I crouched behind the window curtain chest, heaving eyes glued to the tree line. I stood there for almost an hour, waiting for a shadow to step out from the woods. But no one came. And I never went back to that forest. Someone had set a trap, not to trick someone who was lost, but to wait for someone curious enough and dumb enough to walk right into it. Story 3. The picnic table in the meadow. A place completely silent, a strange table, and a tent that shouldn't have been there. It was August 2013, and the heat over the southern Oregon mountains was thick and oppressive. I was in the Air Force at the time, and my best friend Nick, also a fellow airman, and I decided to head up into the mountains after a long shift looking for a new trail to explore. It was our usual way to decompress. We had a thing for old abandoned trails, dangerous, remote, and always intriguing. That day, dark storm clouds hovered over the ridge, the sky a swirling grey. We picked a path we'd never tried before, rough, overgrown, and completely deserted. Not a soul in sight for almost an hour. Then we rounded a bend through the dense trees, and suddenly a wide meadow opened up in front of us. It was surrounded by thick clusters of aspen trees, and right in the centre of that unnervingly quiet clearing was a giant, bright orange picnic table, massive and totally out of place. I got out of the car to take a look. The table was unusually tall, so high I had to climb onto it just to sit down. Everything about it felt wrong. There was no campsite, no fire pit, no footprints, no birds, no insects. Just a suffocating dead silence. Nick called out from the car. He was staring at something off to the right. I walked over and saw it too. A small tent hidden just beyond the tree line, only a few dozen steps away, and clearly visible from where we stood, which meant whoever was inside had definitely seen us too. Camping wasn't allowed in that area, and it was obvious whoever pitched that tent didn't want to be found. I hesitated. Nick whispered, "Call out, see if anyone's there." So I did. "Hello, anyone in there?" No answer, no movement, not even the sound of breathing. The silence made us nervous. Nick suggested I go check it out while he kept the engine running. My heart was pounding as I stepped towards the tent. The closer I got, the clearer it became. There was no bedroll, no lantern, just backpacks, and piles of women's clothing stuffed into the corners. I turned around and ran. That's when Nick screamed, "Run, someone's coming, go now." I burst out of the trees. There, blocking the road out of the meadow, was an old Ford Taurus parked sideways. 3 people inside, 2 men up front, and someone in the back seat, head leaned against the window, unmoving. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman. Nick hit the gas, swerving hard to avoid the Taurus. The driver tried to block us, but Nick cut away, diving down the hill that led back to the trailhead. We didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't know if they followed. Only when we reached the main road did we finally exhale. I called the state police. They said they'd send someone to check it out. The next day I got a call from an officer. He said they found nothing. The tent, the bags, the clothes all gone. No signs anyone had been there. Just the orange picnic table, sitting alone in that silent meadow. We never went back, and we never will. A table placed in the stillness of nature to lure someone in, but no one knows what's waiting in the trees. If you're watching this video in the dark, then you are truly braver than most. The 3 stories you just heard are fragments of memory from ordinary people like you and me. But what they experienced was anything but ordinary. They simply went out for a stroll, enjoyed the night, and explored nature. And then they discovered that sometimes nature isn't the scariest thing of all. If you have a chilling experience you'd like to share, leave a comment below. And remember, sometimes the scariest part isn't the darkness, but the moment you believe you're safe. Oh,